since 1966.
This is NBC4's News Conference with Conan Nolan, Southern California's longest-running public affairs program.
On this edition of News Conference, the state of California files its 60th lawsuit against the Trump administration, this time over the president's decision to end the so-called California waiver, giving the state authority to set its own auto pollution standards. So is this headed to the U.S. Supreme Court? And what about the president's suggestion that the federal government intervene in California's homeless crisis? We talk with California Attorney General Javier Becerra. And is the state planning on going around the Trump administration by cutting more side deals with automakers? We talk with Mary Nichols, chair of the influential California Air Resources Board. And a change of plans for presidential candidate Kamala Harris, who says she's now all in for Iowa. Where does she need to finish in that state in order to stay in the race? We talk with Jessica Levinson of Loyola Law School and Dan Schnurr of USC. Good morning and welcome to the Tom Brokaw News Center here at Universal City. I'm Conan Nolan. Joining us from Sacramento is the Honorable Javier Becerra, the Attorney General for the state of California. Mr. Attorney General, thanks for taking the time.
Conan, good to be with you.
So the Clean Air Act 1970 establishes a national standard for clean cars and auto emissions. There's a carve-out for California because we've been fighting smog. Now, automakers decided, of course, to make cars based on the much stricter California standard because they didn't want to make two different cars. Now, years later, the federal government is saying, you know, we want the national standard to be the national standard. And so it is currently unfair for Texans to be forced to drive cars that only Californians approve of. We understand why what the president is doing is upsetting California officials, but why is it illegal?
Because of everything, Conan, that you outlined at the very beginning. Congress passed the Clean Air Act. Congress, in passing that act, included in the statute a way for California to gain a waiver. We have to be able to prove that we have a basis to get the waiver to be able to exceed those standards. We have done that. We've gotten over 100 waivers from the federal government over those last 50 years. Never once has a waiver been revoked. In fact, I defy the administration to find a place in the Clean Air Act where it says the administration can revoke that waiver. And so, once again, the president is trying to change the law by breaking the law, and in California, we just don't put up with that.
But for those who study civics, doesn't federal law trump state law?
Absolutely does. And the federal law gives California a way to gain a waiver, and that's what we got. We followed the law.
Some have suggested that the administration will seek a fast track of your litigation to the U.S. Supreme Court so there can be a ruling before the next election and possibly before a new president is sworn into office. Would you welcome that?
You know, we've seen this run to mommy so often by this administration, where if they don't get their way, if everyone doesn't play with the marbles the same way they do, they want to pack up and leave. And in most cases, the teacher, the principal, has sort of sat the Trump administration down and said, no, Johnny, that's not the way we play on the playground. And so they want to continue to run to mommy. They think that the Supreme Court is going to give them a different ruling. We're just going to follow the law.
The state of California has signed a side deal with 4 automobile manufacturers who've said, listen, we will abide by the California standard regardless of what the federal government says. The administration, supposedly, we're told, is going to file an antitrust lawsuit saying that that side deal is against the law. Are you concerned about that?
I wish the federal government, Conan, was serious about antitrust violations, because they're out there. And we could use their support in helping us make sure that we don't let anti-competitive activities by some companies ruin the day for consumers who want real competition and the best prices and good quality in the services and products they're supposed to get. But doing this, using the Department of Justice at the U.S. level to try to threaten companies who are trying to help clean up the air and have cleaner burning vehicles, you know, we're going to do what we need to do. By the way, Conan, you've noticed probably in the days since the Trump administration made their announcement about trying to yank California's waiver and trying to backslide on clean car standards, that those companies that are willing to work with California have not backslided themselves. They're still there. That should be a clear message. The silence is deafening by the automakers who are not joining the Trump administration in their proposals.
Does your office have any interest in the legality of the federal government injecting itself into the California homeless crisis. That's what the president seems to be indicating. He was openly discussing that the agencies of the federal government will come in to San Francisco and Los Angeles and apply some federal law to homelessness.
Again, if they want to be helpful, they want to be constructive, they are welcome. If they want to be nasty and do the kinds of things that we've seen them try to do to California, then we'll do what we need to do. We're going to move forward. We are trying at every level, state and local level, to figure out how best to take on this challenge of homelessness and more affordable housing. And we could use the federal government support. We could use the federal government stop cutting some of the resources that they used to provide to help us get people into affordable housing. This administration has actually made it more difficult for us to have the resources to actually help provide people support to get into good, affordable housing. And so absolutely we would welcome their initiatives to help us, but not to hurt us.
And finally, I know you haven't endorsed. I'm not sure if you plan on endorsing before the California primary, but from where you stand, what is most important for the Democratic Party? Finding a candidate who will defeat Donald Trump, or finding a Democratic candidate who represents fundamental and structural change in government and the economy?
I don't believe those are mutually exclusive. I would simply say this: we are not going to tiptoe into the White House. There's a guy, a Texan, who used to have a saying, I think it's something like, never do mild. I would just admonish our Democratic candidates, never do mild. This is not a time for mild. People want us to stand up. People want us to fight for what is right. And people want us to explain right away what we're doing. And so I would just say to folks, don't expect that we'll get into the White House if you're going to try to tiptoe into it. We got to go out there and prove that we've earned it.
The Honorable Javier Becerra, the Attorney General for the state of California, thank you very much for taking the time.
Thanks, Conan.
Up next, she's the point person for California on climate change and runs the most influential state agency in the nation. Mary Nichols, head of the California Air Resources Board, when we return.